Welcome, Joe, to the ProFit podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for asking me both, Matt and Paul. It's great to be here on a lovely, kind of sunny Friday.
It's sunny where I am, yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be 35. Is it 35 next week it's going to be?
Apparently so.
Something like that.
Yeah, get some cream on.
Yeah.
Now, we've got you on today to talk about all things mental health. But I actually know you from a very, very, very long time ago. Just to give listeners some background, Joe used to be one of my personal training clients back in the day.
It was a long time ago, that.
A long time ago, and we have a lot of kind of mutual friends in the industry as well, and things like that. And then I've always kind of been in contact with you through social media and things, and just seeing recently what you now do. I thought that is definitely a subject we need to get on the podcast and discuss. So for the benefit of the listeners, can you give a brief intro to your background and what you do right now?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I think when I knew you, Paul, I was in the NHS. I was a mental health nurse in the NHS, and I had a really varied background and career from drug and alcohol services, child and adolescents, right through to risk and governance and forensic psychiatry. So very broad, but always worked with people, you know.
Yeah.
So when you work with people, you begin to learn a lot about them, but you also begin to learn a lot about yourself, which is a good thing sometimes. But you have to learn a lot about yourself as well to be effective, I guess. So I then went through a period of real, kind of struggles really with my own mental health. And that was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, where I experienced, and some of the listeners might be familiar with this term, and you might be, burnout. So I'd completely exhausted myself in my work life. So it was work-related stress, but actually it was called burnout. And I took a step back, kind of thought about what I wanted, had a very young family at the time, and just realized that actually my job wasn't worth my health. And I'd had a big career, I'd done very well. I was a senior leader. I was an associate director. I'd had a great career, but actually it had taken its toll. And I think it's something that I think a lot of people who have those leadership roles, perhaps, and management roles in big companies, they might ignore those early warning signs, because I know that I did. I probably ignored them for about a year before actually I was driving down the motorway one day and going to a meeting, and I needed to get petrol. And I pulled in at the petrol station and I looked at the fuel tank and I thought, I'm as empty as my fuel tank. I had just nothing. I filled up my car, got in, turned round, went home, and I didn't go back to work after that.
Ever?
No, never. No, I never. I just took time off, and then made that decision that actually my health and my family's well-being was more important than the job that I had at the time. But from that, I decided what I loved doing was helping people to improve themselves, be better, really understand who they are and where their place is in the world. So I did a coaching course. And then I had like a bit of a eureka moment where I thought, why aren't I helping people in the workplace be better, helping businesses understand mental health more and really use what I'd experienced to help others? And that's what I do now. So I kind of, working with you in mind was a name that just came to me. I work with businesses of all sizes, helping them to understand what can work for them in the workplace around mental health, but supporting particularly managers and leaders to understand their own mental health and well-being. And when that gets better, lots of other things get better in their life.
That's really good. So
that's where I'm at.
That's really good. I suppose like what you've ended up doing for a living and coaching is the person you probably needed when you were
because I didn't get any of that.
Fuel tank.
Yeah, I didn't get any of that. I was signposted to occupational health. I was signposted, obviously I went to my GP. They are things that can be helpful, but they are not things that are going to get to the root of the problem. You know, because a big organisation like the NHS is so bureaucratic, and yes, it's very good, and yes, it has its challenges, and it's not that I don't disbelieve in the NHS, but the way it kind of lets staff down is you know, is terrible, really. And I think it has improved over COVID, so that's what I've heard. But yeah, for me, it wasn't a great experience, because automatically what happens is HR get involved, and then your kind of head's falling off, because you're going to think, well, am I going to be disciplined? Is this going somewhere where I don't really think it should go? And when you have no emotional energy left, it's hard to kind of fight those battles.
That's really interesting to get an insight into what a company actually does with it, and we'll talk more about that. If I'm if I'm a personal trainer listening to this, I am a personal trainer listening to this now. Like, one of the we always say, probably what we want to ask is what me and Matt want to know. But one of the first things I think where we could start is those early warning signs you talked about. But first of all, what is mental health? What, if I'm a personal trainer training somebody, what am I looking for? What signs can I be looking for?
Yeah, so I think it's really, really important to say that everybody has mental health. And our mental health is fluid, and it changes minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, depending on what's going on in your life. And I think that that's really important message to get across, because what is different is mental ill health, which we might, you know, kind of come on to a little bit later. So when our mental health is well, you know, we're thriving in life, we're able to have joy, enjoy what we do, you know, we have good, healthy relationships, whether that's working relationships or interpersonal relationships, you know, we're kind of have a positive outlook on life, even though a positive mindset isn't always helpful, by the way. And, you know, what we want to do is create that well-being for ourselves and find things that make us feel good in our mental health and well-being, because our mental health, it is our mind, but it's also our emotions, it's our physical health, and I think for many people it's also their spiritual health. And if one of those things is slightly off, that can then lead to other areas becoming slightly off as well. So, and it's really about our mental health. You know, one of the simple things that I use is a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being, are you barely surviving life at the moment, to 10 being, I'm fully thriving. And I ask myself that most days. You know, if I'm having a bit of a rough day, it's like, so where am I today? I'm a 5. So what can I go and do today that's going to help me with my mental health to take it to 5.5 or a 6? You know, and it fluctuates throughout the day. And I think a lot of people think that that's wrong, but actually that's how it should be. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be static, in order for our emotions and the way that we process our feelings and emotions. It's going to change, because we're going to face different challenges in life frequently.
That's really, just reminded me of something there. Is I have 2 adopted sons now, like since I met you, and one of them struggles with social and emotional needs, and he goes to a particular school for that. And that is something they do all throughout the day. The children come in the morning and they put on a sliding scale. Here's how I feel today. And it might be a 3, but they're encouraged all through the day to keep moving that number around. And is it just that check-in and that awareness that's so important?
It is, because it may be that, you know, you come into work. I'm thinking about people that are coming into work now, that they come into work and they've had a bit of a rough journey to work. So they might have got up feeling great. They get the tram, or they drive in, you know, it's hot weather, and their well-being and their mental health will just start to kind of deteriorate, because what might be happening is they find themselves being quite snappy because it's hot, or irritable because someone's cut them up. And it's just those things then implode on their mental health. They then come into work and, you know, somebody has kindly left them a glass of water or a cup of tea on their desk, and that changes it. And then they open their emails and they're thinking, right, how do I prioritize these 10 emails that are of all equal importance today? So again, their mental health, because their stress levels will rise. If they have anxiety, that will start to creep up a little bit as well. And before they know it, they're kind of overwhelmed, overthinking, and not being very productive. So that scale is so simple, and it's about finding things that help you stay on track rather than getting into those negative mindset about this is all too much, I can't do this today, I'm a failure, everything's going to go wrong, which is our thinking. And when we think that we have about 60,000 thoughts that go through our mind every single day, we can't cope with that many thoughts, obviously. So we've got to get rid to get rid of a few of them to be able to process the important things in life that matter.
Yeah. You said spiritual health as well. There was components of it there, mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. So is that something you deal with as well?
I do work with people that have faith, that they have a spirituality that sometimes feels unfulfilled, perhaps because of they're struggling with their mental health, and it's really causing them what's the word I'm looking for, kind of conflict. So they may be living a lifestyle that's not in line with perhaps what they believe.
So like a higher purpose, a faith.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it might be around that, perhaps I'm thinking more around kind of drugs and alcohol, because I do kind of have a lot of my one-to-ones, because I've got a background in kind of addiction. I get a lot of people that have had drug and alcohol problems. And so when you maybe are consuming lots of alcohol, then your emotions are dampened right down. Your spirituality is dampened right down. So you're kind of less in touch with what's really going on. So that's where I think the spiritual health becomes very important for people, because also it helps them in their recovery journey and process as well.
Yeah. And I'd imagine people's physical health is in decline as well when you're dealing with that kind of thing. So it's all intertwined.
It's all interconnected, really. So when people talk about mental health, I think, it's us as human beings, really. It's everything that we bring to our life on a day-to-day basis. But because mental health is so big at the moment, and it has been since the pandemic, because what tends to happen, interestingly enough, is every time there's a crisis, so I'm thinking about the 2008 recession, mental health, particularly in the workplace, became a big focus. Then it kind of tails off and it becomes back to normal, inverted commas, when I say that, by the way. And then when there's another crisis, it becomes to the forefront again.
Yeah.
And actually what needs to happen, I believe, is that we can't just respond in a crisis. It has to be embedded firmly into organizations, into people's understanding, into whatever they're doing, that mental health is a priority for you to have a good life.
That might lead us nicely into the next kind of topic we had to talk about, because I'm old enough to have lived through the 2008 recession and then seen the kind of uplift and then back into this one. And that's probably my first experience of like going down, then up, then down. And so you're saying it should be a more kind of consistent approach rather than being reactive all the time.
Yeah, because it is, we are very, I think as a culturally, I think we are very reactive. I'm kind of thinking, I think some trains weren't running last week because of the heat, and the rails were melting. And
no, is that true?
Well, that's what I've read. It could not be true, but we know that every winter and every summer that there's a bit of a critical point in this country because we're not used to it. But we can't react and live a life ourselves and not be used to the fact that we're always going to face challenges. We're always going to have things happening in life. And I guess, I don't know whether you're going to ask me about resilience, but I guess, we have to learn to build our resilience and knowing how to respond.
So we'll definitely come to resilience. Right. That was one thing we definitely wanted to talk about and be, being proactive around that. But one thing we were going to ask, and this is something before we clicked record today that me and Matt talked about, was we're coming at this from, we're a couple of morons, don't really know too much about this. Are we too aware of mental health? Or is it a case, like you're saying, of at the minute it's everywhere and that's not really how it should be? I'm not sure.
It's a great question, actually. I think it's really a good question. Are we too aware of mental health? I think the important thing is about becoming aware of each individual person's own mental health is really, really important. And if you're prepared to kind of do the work around your own mental health, i.e., be prepared to be very honest with yourself, you know, this is what I'm good at, and this is where I really need to kind of have a look at, you know, areas in my life, how I feel about things, the way I react, how I communicate, because communication is massive for our mental health.
Yeah.
I don't think you can ever be too aware of your own mental
Yeah.
health, because it's going to make you a better human being, but also what it can do is make you feel a little bit lonely if you're not connected to the right people, because connection and community becomes really important around mental health and well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you, like, I guess what you were saying there was making it more of a part of the fabric of the culture is a better approach, so that people are more aware of it rather than this big reactive explosion,
Yeah,
which is maybe what we were, maybe when me and Matt wrote it down. I don't know what you think about this, Matt. Maybe that's what we were getting at, is that it's a massive kind of explosion of it now, having seemingly been not much of it.
Yeah, I think what Joe was alluding to earlier was like the fact that mental health is part of the human experience. It's up and down. And I think when I was thinking about that question, I think there's been a lot of awareness placed on when you're feeling down. And I don't know whether that's given off the wrong perception in terms of people then interpret that as, I shouldn't ever feel down. I should always feel, you know, when you talked about the dangers of always being positive.
yeah.
I think there's been a bit too much of that as a misinterpretation of what mental health actually is. So the minute someone feels, if someone normally sits at around a 5 or a 6, the minute they drop slightly below that, it's as if they've got, you know, oh, I'm depressed, I'm in depression or something like that. And, you know, we've got to be careful using strong words like that. So that's how I was thinking about it is, I think the first thing people might need to do off the back of what you said, Joe, is just get that awareness of this is all part of the human experience. It's up and down, it's both.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we focus too much on when we feel down and never recognize the up bits, it might always feel like we're stuck in this negative space.
Yeah, no, I think that you've summarized that really well there, Matt. I think, and I particularly like the word, you know, the fact that you kind of use the word depression, but actually being mindful that depression just isn't a low mood.
Yeah.
You know, depression is an illness. It's a diagnosis. It is life-changing for people. But again, there are different types of depression that we kind of perhaps, you know, don't. Maybe people aren't aware of that. You know, there can be reactive depression to a loss or to a major change, and then there can be clinical depression, which someone has had a lifetime and they really don't really recover from that in the same way as you can from a reactive depression. So I think what happens is labeling and diagnoses become very dangerous for people if they're not aware.
Yeah.
And so I tend to stay away from using a diagnosis unless I have to. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not even qualified to talk about. I mean, I know what signs and symptoms are, don't get me wrong, and I can point people in the right direction. But what I find is a lot of people say, oh, I'm feeling really depressed. And when you go through what that feels like for them, it's not depression in the sense of an illness. It's that they've got challenges and they don't know what to do. They don't know, they haven't got the skills or the tools to help them move out of that particular frame of mind at that time. And that's really, really important, because what you'll find social media floods you with, you know, to feel good, you need a bubble bath, you need a bar of chocolate, or you need a glass of wine. And I'm there thinking, no. You do, okay, those things might be nice, but what you actually need is someone that is able to listen to you, someone that can actually help you say no, someone that can help you set boundaries, someone that can really kind of go on this journey with you when you are struggling. To me, that's good mental health care. Not chocolate, not a glass of Prosecco, and not a bubble bath. They're things that are just nice.
Yeah, they're sort of just sort of the instant attainment of pleasure, aren't they? As opposed to
And there are often things, I think, particularly, you know, if we take personal hygiene just as a conversation, is that when someone is low in mood, perhaps that's one of the things that they really struggle with, you know, getting out of bed, cleaning their teeth, having a wash, putting some fresh clothes on, you know, and particularly, yes, if someone was depressed, that might be something that goes first of all and becomes noticeable to people around them. So when somebody is able to get out of bed, you know, change their pajamas, have a wash and clean their teeth, that is moving up the scale.
Yeah.
Because that is very hard to do when you have been that low. Because that self-neglect is something that goes first of all.
Yeah.
I think hearing that's really important, because I think people that are nowhere near that level would score themselves pretty low before they even before they even get anywhere near that.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think that's really, especially for the younger members of our audience and stuff like that. I think that's really important to hear, because that shows you how bad it does get.
Absolutely. And I think what happens is, and I don't think social media really helps this, even though I think social media is really helpful platform, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it doesn't always help kind of the mental health arena, because I think what it doesn't do is talk about those things enough. I think what it does is kind of glamorize it a little bit. Maybe glamorize isn't the right word, but I think it kind of isn't respectful of what it really is and how difficult it can get. So that leads to stigma. That leads to people not believing the person. Oh, come on, pull yourself out of that hole, you'll be fine. And actually, that's probably one of the worst things you can say to anybody. You know, there's that, I think social media doesn't help with that, like you say, Matt, perhaps with younger people that haven't had that worldly wise experience yet, or come into contact with anybody that's really struggling with their mental health and well-being. You know, it's very challenging, and I think it's quite frightening for people. Because in my experience, a lot of people always say to me, but what happens if I say the wrong thing? And I totally get that, because I, you know, before I started my nursing career and worked in mental health, I used to think, oh my gosh, well, what happens if I say the wrong thing to that person? And what happens if they go and harm themselves or do something worse? You know, they take their life, and I was the last person that they spoke to. So those things are very, very real for people, but it's about helping those people to ask the right questions.
So there's a lot of education involved. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about that then. So, because that's what you do in working with you in mind.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Like what you do with an organization, a company, individuals, when you start to work with people, what are the steps? So
if it's an organization, what I'll tend to do is find out what they have already and is it working? Because if it's working, then you don't really need me to come in and do anything else, or maybe a few tweaks here and there. But if it's working, but usually it's not, which is why they ask, you know, they ask people to come in, and they've found a new set of challenges, or their sickness levels are going up. You know, particularly obviously through the pandemic, where I think there was, you know, the home working was causing a lot of problems. I think managers felt out of control because they didn't really know if staff were working, or, you know, there was a whole load of like myths going around. So the way that I tend to work in organizations is helping managers and leaders look after their own mental health, understand how to spot the signs in behavior change. So we don't go anywhere near a diagnosis. We don't talk about depression. We don't talk about anxiety so much, schizophrenia, you know, all the major mental illnesses, because it's behavior change that's going to let you know about when something's not right with somebody, whether it's family member, you know, or somebody in the workplace. So we do a lot about spotting the signs, unpicking kind of case studies, and helping them to kind of realize they know a lot already, but a lot of it is how to ask good questions with empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
When you talk, oh, sorry, Joe, when you talk about those behavior change things there, what are typically the types of things that you spot? Because I'm thinking about, again, for our listeners, they are the leaders, they are the managers of their own business very often. So they've not even got quite often they're working alone. They haven't got colleagues and things like that. So maybe for those people, what might those things look like?
Okay, so you're thinking of if they're working with their PT clients?
No, for themselves as the,
For
the owner.
themselves.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
right. So it may be, you know, their motivation levels, their productivity.
Right.
Is, you know, are they as productive, you know, this month as what they were last month, as their eating habits change? Because, you know, a lot of PTs are going to focus on people's nutrition and their diets, but actually, do they focus on their own?
Yep.
Do they focus on their own self-care? You know, are they looking after themselves in the way that they are kind of projecting it out to the people that they work with, you know, their clients? It's often thinking about what are they thinking about on a daily basis? What kind of thoughts are they having? You know, are those thoughts kind of quite negative? Do they think about harming themselves? Do they think about, you know, I don't know anybody in, you know, in the years I've worked with people where suicide does not cross someone's mind. And I think what happens is when we talk about mental health, sometimes we don't talk about the reality that people do end their life by suicide, because actually it is preventable, but for that person, they just want the pain to stop. So the only solution that they have at that time is to end their life by suicide, which is devastating and heartbreaking and impacts so many people. But, you know, that's the reality of mental ill health, really.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I feel that I can never really talk about this without talking about that.
Yeah. No, I think it needs bringing up. And it's, I guess, what you said about communication earlier on is a massive part of it, isn't it? Having that empathy and being able to ask good questions. Again, for listeners who are running their own business and need to be more self-aware, like how do you create an environment where you can ask those kinds of questions? Have you got any helpful pointers around that?
I think first and foremost, it's about business owners, leaders, managers accepting where they're at on their own mental health, their journey with mental health. And
so they have to model it. They really have to model it initially.
Yeah, I think so, because I think if you're a good leader, you will probably allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable. You know, you will say, you know, hey, you know what, today's not a good day for me. I've got some personal things going on. I don't need to share what that is, but, you know, I just want you to know that I'm not my best today. And those conversations, you're giving a clear message to other people that they have permission to do the same thing. So if you
really interesting.
Yeah, I find that totally fascinating, really, of how that works. But it does work. It does work, because if you have somebody who's at your line manager, you know, director, and they're just coming in and they're getting on with it, but they're snappy, they're moody, you know, there's something going on, but they block you, they just don't let you in. You kind of think, well, I have to do that as well. I have to manage like that, because that's the culture that is being displayed, basically. So when you
sorry, Joe, but leadership's always been seen as this kind of impeccable person who, you know, is always in the right mood and has always got things under control. And the truth is that that's not true.
No, far from the truth. Far from the truth. You know, I think a leader is somebody that has, obviously, they could be a natural leader, so they have very good leadership skills, or somebody could have worked their way to that position. But often the leaders are the people that are actually following them. They're the important ones, really, because they're the ones that are setting the scene. They're the ones that are kind of setting the culture, which is why I always say to organizations, are your managers your biggest asset or your biggest risk? And they go, oh, that's a very good question. You know, we've got some that are amazing, but some that actually they need a bit of work, because what you want is your managers to be your biggest asset, because they can be a major risk if they're not having the right conversations, if they're not skilled and equipped, if they are not able to be reflective on who they are within that organization or within that team, and if they just portion blame on everybody else. Come from a blame culture, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, and the best leaders I've ever worked with, and Matt as well, because we've been colleagues over the years, have always been the best communicators. of good news, bad news, news
how
in the middle.
That message. You can deliver the worst news to someone in a way where they go, oh, thanks for telling me that.
Yeah.
You know, because actually what you've done it with, you've thought about it, you know, people are going to respond in a certain way. You know, perhaps they've kind of considered how to be empathetic within that delivery of that message. You know, they've probably gone through the correct process. They just haven't gone in there and say, right, you lot are going to get made redundant if you don't do X, Y, and Z. And there are some people that do that, and like, that is not healthy at all. You know.
So you work with the leaders first. That's really good. And then
work with the leaders first. Yeah. And get them to understand. I mean, I think one of the most, I took it as a major compliment, because I was working with these group of managers, and there was a lot of men on this particular session. And one guy just said to me, I've just had a bit of a moment. And I said, are you okay? And he went, yeah. He said, I think it's positive. And I said, you're happy to share? And you always check in with people, are they happy to share? Because some people aren't. You know, it's very, very important. We make an assumption that people are quite happy to kind of disclose. He said, yeah, he said, I've just realized that sometimes I am the problem. And I went, that is my job done. I said, you can go home and take an early afternoon. I said, that is brilliant. And for you to be able to kind of share that with your colleagues, that sometimes I am the problem. I said, you're not the only one. I said, it's just that you've had the courage to actually say, I can be the problem.
If we all said that, sometimes the world would be a better place, because we'd be able to tackle it together. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, so some great leaders need to take a message from him by just saying, you know, I think that I'm the problem, and perhaps it's not my team all of the time, but even though I want to blame them, it's me that's got to stop and reflect on my behavior and how I'm turning up to work and how I'm speaking to people. And I'm like, this is brilliant. Let's keep doing this, because this is what is going to make the change.
That's ace. That's really good.
I'm wondering, Joe, in terms of the work that we do, again, trying to help the personal trainers that work with their clients. So I see them as like, they're the ones leading their clients. And I like this idea of like being open about your current state, and that then creates this culture. I know that's something I've done in the past, and I know that probably Paul's done the same, and this might be incorrect, is that we've always sort of taught people that when you're running your own business, you've got to have that game face, like regardless of what's going on at home, you've got to turn up, you've got to be on point, you've got to be, you know, you've got to be on time, you've got to be organized, all of that still has to happen. And I'm wondering to what degree, you know, because we often think about things from a business perspective.
Yeah.
How in your opinion, like how much can we let our own clients in? How much do we maybe need to keep that separate? Would it be better to have someone else to turn to and still try and put on that game face with our clients? Because I know as well as Paul probably does that personal trainers are as up and down as anyone.
Oh,
probably
absolutely.
More so.
Well, we had a rule, just to add to that before, we had a rule, and this might be completely incorrect, but we had 160 trainers overall in Profit in the end. And we always had a rule that we never complained down, but there was always very good support above.
Yeah.
So if you did need to talk to somebody, there was always someone available. But what we said was try and go up with that rather than down, just in case the person, you know, isn't the type of person who can handle what you're going to say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't know whether, again, no idea whether that's correct or not.
I think that's good. I think, you know, I think a buddy system is really helpful. I think you have to just be mindful of your own boundaries. You know, when I talk about boundaries, I mean, are you kind of strong enough to be able to deal with a conflict? Perhaps, you know, you've got a client that you know is quite difficult. I'm sure Paul has probably thought that about me in the past. Maybe, oh, Joe's a pain in the back.
Never.
But, you know, you've all got those, everyone has those clients that can be a little bit challenging on a day-to-day basis. They may be going through things that you resonate. How do you protect yourself from that? You know, and it's about being that person being mindful of what's happening for them, and do they feel able to bring good quality work? Are they going to be able to be productive in that session? I think timekeeping really it's fundamental in work anyway, but I think if you've got somebody that's consistently late, then they're giving you a non-verbal message before you've even met them, whether it's the trainer or whether it's the client.
Yeah.
That's about their motivation. That's about perhaps what's going on for them. That's about how they feel about themselves. Are they worthy to have this session? That it becomes really deep and complex. But I think having a buddy system, and I think going up is great, because like you say, if other people are a little bit inexperienced and they're just stepping out into the world of working with human beings, they're going to come across some very, very interesting and challenging characters as well. You might have someone that's extremely demanding and rude. How are you going to manage that? You've got to be able to take a step back and say, actually, I'm finding this conversation really difficult with you today. Should we just take 5 minutes, come back and start again? And be okay with that, because actually you are looking after yourself in that time when that happens.
I think that's really important for PTs to hear, because inevitably, as I did, and I'm sure Matt did as well, when you first get into this industry, you do it to try and help people. That's kind of that's on your mind, and you always think about, I'm serving people, I'm trying to help people. But setting those boundaries is just personally experiencing it. It took me a while to do it, but when I did, I actually became more effective at helping people. And I'm finding that now as a parent as well. That's another scenario to do it in. Your girls are so tall now. I know
my girls are kind of proper women now, except for the youngest. She's still 15, but you have to, when you become a parent, you're constantly setting boundaries every minute of the day. And I think until you get into that world of setting boundaries with your kids, sometimes setting boundaries with other people it's a bit alien, really.
There's a guilt that comes with it.
It's the guilt that comes, and I think that creates that internal conflict then of, have I done the right thing? But often you have done the right thing, and sometimes it's about going to somebody and saying, okay, this person came today, they were in a really, really bad mood, and I felt that it wasn't appropriate for me to or I felt that I couldn't deal with it, or whatever it was. And having that other person, like your buddy, to go to say, was that right? Did I do the best thing at that time? But actually the session ended really well. I think it's about having that. It's like supervision, or it's another form of coaching, I guess, isn't it, really? It's just about having that other person to go to and say, I don't really like this client that I've got. The way that nurses don't like all of their patients. I didn't like all of my patients, especially when they were calling me all names under the sun, but I still cared for them, but it's hard sometimes not to take things personally when you feel vulnerable yourself.
Yeah. So the first thing is checking in with yourself first, and doing all the work yourself.
Where am I today? What's happened to me today? Where am I on that scale of 0 to 10? Am I at a 5? Am I going to be able, and particularly if you know somebody that's particularly challenging that you've got that day, okay, so how am I going to build up my resilience to be able to be effective? Or do I actually need to take a step back and not be in work today, and be honest about that with yourself?
Yeah, it's that communication with yourself first and foremost, isn't it? So you might not just be able to, well, this again neatly kind of leads us on to the next bit about resilience.
Right, okay.
This is a big topic me and Matt want to talk about. Like, how
you like the word resilience. Such a man word.
And I guess it's, so just what we said there, if you are feeling a 3 out of 10, taking a step back, and being able to do that, I think that's quite difficult. I think I'd find that quite difficult to be able to go, I'm 3 out of 10 today. I'll take a step back and I'll have a day off work. I genuinely, just being honest, I think I'd find that hard to do. And I guess
I really wanted to get into why then, but that might be a really personal reason.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I think I'd probably a bit of, my experience over the years of being honest, probably seeing that as a bit of a weakness, that I need to push through that, and I need to be not resilient. Resilient's probably the wrong word, but it's something that I can push past. And again, just being honest, I can genuinely say I think I have gained some resilience from those kinds of experiences in the past. I think it has actually given me some confidence. So when we talk about resilience, I know we need to kind of tread carefully with this as well, but I think sometimes we're denied those experiences of finding something hard and pushing past it. But I'm also aware of what we just talked about, is that that's really important as well, to know, look, sometimes it's okay to say, I'm gonna step away from this. And I think that's something I'm bad at personally. I think that's something I'm still working on.
That's interesting, because I often think when, and this is not directed at you, Paul, by any means, I'm being quite general when I say this, often when people can't step away, sometimes it's because they don't prioritize their own self-care. And it's just that permission to say, you know what, I'm important. You know, I've got a family that I need to look after. I've got children that I need to look after, or whatever it is. I'm just going to have to take a step back for today. Do what makes me feel good. Do what I enjoy. Go home, eat nice food, or whatever it is that you choose to do with that time, and you will feel better the next day. But it is about giving yourself that permission to say, you know what, I need to look after myself. I agree in terms of, you know, pushing through difficulties, but sometimes, you know what, those difficulties can feel like they're just coming at you left, right, and centre. And sometimes you just have to go, you know what, it's enough for today. I've had enough, and I'm not doing that.
Yeah. How much do I owe you for today? That's kind of sorted me out. No, that's really good. I mean, I wasn't expecting that, but it's probably you've nailed it on the head there. Is that, and that's something I know I still work on personally, to make sure that there is a balance between pushing through challenges and knowing when to go, this is just a bit too much and I need to look after myself a bit better. And
do you think it's associated with men more, if we're going to look at that a little bit, you know? I think that of men being tough and strong and being able to deal with everything that comes at them, you don't have to. I think it's about knowing when you allow yourself permission to say, right, today is just not the day for this. But tomorrow you'll probably be much more productive.
Do you ever find as well though, Paul, because I think I'd be like you, I think I'd really struggle to say I'm taking to, I know I wouldn't.
I know you would.
but my argument to myself, and again, I could be kidding myself here, this could be a blind spot of mine, I genuinely think that I feel better for showing up. And, you know, I love the work that I do with my clients. It's a hobby that is my career, essentially. You know, it's something I really enjoy. So when you say take the day off and go and do something you'd enjoy, I sort of think, well, I'd probably be sat there thinking I should have just done the sessions with my clients, because I really enjoy being with them, and I really enjoy doing the work. Or I'd probably just go off to the gym myself and do my own training, which obviously we should all do anyway. But I'm just sort of wondering as well, like, you know, how that might impact, because I think that's why I would struggle to take the day off, because I would convince myself, rightly or wrongly, I'm better to do it because I'm doing what I enjoy.
I guess my question there then might be around, okay, so if that happens once and you push through it and you continue, what I would say is start to think about how frequently it pops up for you.
Right. Yeah.
Because if it's popping up more frequently, then you are getting a very strong message, whether it's physically, emotionally, or mentally, to take a step back.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's when the pushing through doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because you have to maybe take a step back and go, stop, pause, reflect, what the heck's going on for me here? Because last week I felt like this week I feel like this, and it's been consistent for 4 weeks. What am I ignoring? Because our bodies, as you know, are amazing as giving us little warning signs when things aren't right. And usually it might be more physical for some people in the first instance, could be emotional, but our brain will always try and override everything.
Yeah.
But our bodies are like the dashboard of our life, really. You know, stomach pains, back pain, cramps, headaches are a massive one. These are all things to say to you, can you give me a break? Can you just stop and pay me some attention, please? Because I'm just going to keep doing this until you do.
Yeah.
So that would be my question to you, Matt.
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
I think that's a good one. I think that because I have had days like that and pushed through, and thankfully I've never had it as like a common thing. Like, and I suppose as well, this may be on a different subject. This is where it might help, because the reason I know that pattern's never occurred is because I do journal. I that's part of my daily routine.
Yeah.
So I suppose some people might not be aware it's happening that frequently if they're not checking in with themselves. So it goes back to that point, doesn't it? You've got to do that bit first. You've got
to find the tools that work for you, because, you know, as human beings, what works for me, what works for you, and what works for Paul will be very, very different.
Yeah.
The more equipped, which is why, you know, the way that I do my work is I equip people with tools and skills to be able to, one, find things that they know work for them. And then they can start being able to kind of see patterns and identify when things aren't right and use those tools. But it's like anything, it's like working in the gym. Our brain is a muscle that still needs to have work on it on a regular basis. One day of journaling is not going to solve problems. You've got to be consistent the way you've got to be consistent in the gym.
Yeah, that's very similar approach to where we coach PTs as well, is to build up a toolbox for your clients, help build a toolbox for your clients that they then know how to use the ones that are effective for them.
Yeah.
If PTs, again, for our audience, what types of tools, or are there any tools that a personal trainer could help a client with in terms of their mental health while they're doing their exercise sessions? Are there anything like journaling that clients could start that would really help them out?
I mean, I think there's many tools. I think it's about, does the personal trainer feel skilled enough to be able to help the person? So I think, again, it's about that, the PTs feeling equipped and skilled in their abilities in themselves. So there are many different ways to journal. That's the thing. And I think it's about, you know, I do a thing called morning pages where I just write 3 pages in the morning and that's it, done. Other people might do their journaling in the evening, but the thing with that is that day's done. You know, in the morning, you're getting rid of all your negative thoughts before you've started the day. So you're clearing the clutter out before you even start your day. So, you know, there's kind of very many, there's a lot of different rules really of how to do different things. But I think if somebody feels confident in that, using that scaling 0 to 10, that can be quite a big game changer. If someone comes into a session, they've just rushed from work and they're frazzled, and your PT says to you, hold on, before we start, I just want to check in with you. You look like you've had a really tough day today. Where are you on a scale of 0 to 10? And that might help set the tone for the session. For example, it might be someone says, yeah, I'm absolutely exhausted. Okay, well, we're just going to do something a little bit different to start with. I think maybe I should have been a PT, Paul. I don't know. Maybe we're going to do something a little bit different to start with and then see how you are. But you can check in with that person 3 times in an hour. How do you feel now?
I think that's a great one. Yeah.
You know, it's very simple. Trust me, it's very, very effective because I use it a lot. And you know, what it will identify for that personal trainer is that person's mood can shift in that hour several times.
Yeah. And even if the trainer did that, as you were saying before, if the trainer was doing it on themselves as well, to see where am I on the scale and modeling it, and the client gets to do that as well. And just thinking back to that I hadn't thought of before, is in my boys' school, the teachers do it as well. So that the kids can see it. Yeah, and then it's a bit
like a therapist having a therapist. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, it's just, I was saying, so that everybody's in on it and everybody is aware of how everyone else is feeling in the schools, so that they're kind of like, oh, and such is an 8, such and such is a 4, and it just helps people understand how to communicate with those people.
Absolutely. And you know, most people can associate with a number.
Yeah.
Not everyone can verbalize how they feel because perhaps they don't know what that feeling is, or perhaps they're on the verge of tears, or perhaps they're just on the verge of absolutely losing it for the day. But actually, if you just said to someone, just tell me on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being barely being able to get out of bed today, to 10 being living your best life, fully thriving, where would you put yourself? Because it stops. You know, we don't always want to stop emotion, but we just want that person to kind of be a bit more grounded before they go into doing a PT session where potentially there's a risk of injury.
Yeah, they're going to physically exert themselves, which they might not be ready for. Yeah, depends how hard you're going to push them.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, particularly, you know, maybe for new PTs, you know, it's not always good to push someone physically if they're struggling emotionally. Because it might increase their stress, or it might increase their anxiety, because inside what that person might be thinking, oh, I can't do that today. Why can't I do it today? But yeah, I could do it last week. What's that about? Do you know what I mean? So because our bodies are so kind of magnificent, really, when you think about it, what it does for us, you know, listening to that, if someone particularly suffers with anxiety, giving them maybe huge cardio exercises to do might not be the right thing. Anything that's going to really increase their heart rate, might make that worse.
Yeah.
They might feel out of breath. They might get into a panic. You know, it's not always the right form of exercise to do if that person's got anxiety.
You might or might not have an answer to this, but is there a particular type of activity or exercise, physical activity, that is more helpful if somebody's suffering from low moods or anxiety, or other particular types of exercises?
Move your body. I think just move your body. If you can move your body when you're in a bit of a funk and your mood's really low, and perhaps you have anxiety, perhaps walking is obviously one of the most beneficial things to us, rather than, you know, kind of real big exertion. But it's different for everybody, Paul. Do you know what I mean? You know, some people might just need to go in the gym and lift up some weights for 30 minutes, put them down and go out, and they're done. They might not want to talk to anyone. They just want to go in, lift, leave. And that makes them feel better. For other people, it might just be walking on a treadmill, swimming, I guess, you know, things where it helps that person not to kind of be up in their thoughts constantly. And it releases the endorphins, you know, it releases the oxytocin, it releases our serotonin, all our feel-good kind of hormones, and also, you know, just allows us to escape those negative thoughts for that short space of time. Can make a massive difference.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's different for every person, isn't it?
Yeah,
it really can be different for every person.
Yeah. You know, we all don't have the same experiences of mental health. That's the thing. And I think, you know, it can be really generalized and become very generic, but actually it's different for everybody. It's different for men, it's different for women, it's different for human beings.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been a really interesting and informative episode, not just from you know, I got something out of it myself. I got quite a big light bulb moment in the middle of the episode, and I know everyone listening to it will have taken a lot of things away. And even just that simple 1 to 10, 0 to 10 scale, I think is huge, a huge tool for PTs to be using with their clients and to be doing with themselves as well.
Yeah.
And that has been really interesting today. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been really interesting. We've kind of been quite of a little journey there of mental health, I think.
Good. For everyone who might want to find you, are you on Instagram? Are you anywhere where people can locate you easily?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Working With You in Mind. I also host a podcast for men's mental health called Let Men Talk. That's also not just up on Instagram now. And I have a website, which is also Working With You in Mind. So all my details of how to get in touch are on there.
Awesome. Right. Well, Jo, thanks for coming on. I think it's such a big topic as well. we potentially might have you back if you're willing to come back on and talk a little bit more about it at a later date, because I think there's no doubt going to be more questions off the back of this episode, and it'd be good to revisit some of it, and maybe me and Matt can have another therapy session. Well,
I was just about to say we'll wait until Paul needs some more coaching.
Yeah, you can come back and see how I'm getting on. Right. So yeah, thank you very much, Joe, for coming on, and we'll see you hopefully in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks very much, guys. It's been a really great conversation. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to the Profit Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Robinson, and I am joined again today with Paul Campe. How are you doing, Paul?
Yes, good, mate. Hi, everybody out there.
And today we've got ourselves another top guest on. We are joined by one of Paul's connections that you got to know a long time ago, didn't you, Paul? And now she's now working in the field of mental health and helping businesses and business owners. So we got her on to talk about that subject, didn't we? And that's what you're about to hear.
Yeah, this was a really fascinating episode. Lots of interesting, in-depth discussions about mental health, which is obviously a huge topic and something really important for personal trainers to be aware of. But you'll hear in the episode us as well. And I think one of the major things that I took from it was that it's all about, first of all, communication with yourself and understanding your own mental health and how important and how much it impacts you. And I thought there was tons of stuff, not just to take away for listeners, but for ourselves today.
Yep, big stuff. Personally, I quite like this idea of leading on this subject and be making it part of your culture. You know, I think of each and every person that's listening to this podcast, you're a leader within your own little community of clients and family and friends and stuff like that. So I think that's something that I'll take away from today when you listen through, is that idea of you've got to lead by example in this area and others will follow. So yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we hope you enjoy our interview with Joe Perruzza.